The value proposition of XRP is that it has these liquidity pools.
Welcome to the DeFi Standard, and this is Mickey B. Fresh. So we had an epic discovery in the XRP community that uncovers probably, in my opinion, the biggest discovery in the history of researching, and it answers so many of the questions and fills in so many of the blanks that have been missing for the past 5 years. Even though these documents were released are from 2020, and they're, because of the SEC versus Ripple case, these were released as part of like a slew of, I think it was 60 to 100 documents. And credit goes to Dark Horse on Twitter for finding this through the court docs. And this was not easy to find. And this matches with many of the things that I already have found. So by putting them together, it validates it, and we have even more information on it. And then the cherry on top is that actually Dark Horse asked David Schwartz in a Twitter Spaces about this discovery. And this discovery is called Prisma. That is the proprietary Ripple technology that delivers best-in-class liquidity and is the trading platform that powers Ripple's payments and crypto liquidity products. It's an execution system that enables price discovery and fulfillment for fiat, crypto assets, and tokens via a globally distributed, highly performant trading platform. And scale quantitative electronic market making systems. And it also has an algorithmic market making systems. And this is what powers on-demand liquidity, ODL, and also Liquidity Hub. But not just that. Even though the court document is 3 years old, it's an internal meeting of Ripple talking about Prisma, which is mentioned 40-something times, and this is right after the MoneyGram ramp up. So just to give a timeline, so for those of you who have been in the community a while, if you remember in 2020, in December, that's when they dropped the case, SEC. This is like midway through 2020, and it's right after the ramp up with MoneyGram, and right before like the SBI VC launch. And there's some hints in there about how Prisma has been implemented, but it's being still built by the team in Iceland, which is Algrim, which was the acqui-hire acquisition in 2019 by Ripple to build out a distributed trading platform. And back then, I remember when that came out, I was on Brad Kimes' Digital Perspectives channel, and we talked about the acquisition of Algrim. And in that actual Ripple Insights, it said Ripple is building a distributed trading platform. So I'm like, okay, the ledger itself, a lot of people might not be aware, this is going to be a series of videos. I'm giving context to what's coming, because if you don't have context, it could be perceived as hype and could be perceived as FUD, but it's, in my opinion, it's super bullish, like beyond bullish of any of these other hype things that are out there. But this is the facts. And this is in the cloud at the application layer. And it's microservices, and it's the next generation of being able to intelligently plug into exchanges, the XRP ledger, other blockchains, and it provides a single API for market makers, for Liquidity Hub, for ODL. This is how they ramped up to 45 corridors. So this is the proprietary tech that Ripple owns. Now, they haven't been super secretive about it, because in the job descriptions, so there's job descriptions of postings, right? They job postings, and then there's employee resumes that they put on LinkedIn, and there's plenty of information. And we're not talking like one or two here. We're talking like 20 to 30 different that all say things like this. And for example, a development of a highly scalable, customer-facing product called Liquidity Hub and the event-based trading platform that powers it. So Prisma's work is benefiting three main areas, and we're going to be leveraging Prisma for the sale of XRP as a service to receivers. So right now, we're doing a lot of work of XRP origination and XRP termination, which you'll hear more about on the send and receive side. But ultimately, what's happening is we'll be able to do is facilitate an ODL transaction without an exchange within that flow. However, we'll then have receivers with XRP on their balance sheets, and they'll need, and they're asking for services to enable them to intelligently sell that XRP onto the open markets. So that's the beauty of Prisma. Prisma will be able to provide services to these receivers who want to sell XRP on the open markets. So think when the sender sends off that XRP, MoneyGram was one of those receivers. Tranglo acts as one. There's many of them. Now, these are not banks, because banks are not holding it on their balance sheets.
Ripple Payments provides a solution for international companies to move money cross-border. They do so using XRP. We are becoming a node in their network of liquidity providers. And our function in the network is a large company using Ripple Payments will open an account on Uphold. It will be pre-funded with XRP by Ripple. And then our role will be to convert the crypto into fiat and to pay out to banks. And obviously that leg is a regulated activity. We'll be operating UK, Europe, Europe, UK, UK, US, Europe, US. Those are the corridors that we initially open in. We're very excited because next year we open into Brazil as well. And, as you probably know, Brad, I mean, moving money across border is not just difficult for people, expensive, slow, and error prone. Even companies, it's difficult to move money across border in certain situations. We've just got licensed in Canada, and you wouldn't believe how difficult it is just funding the bank account that we've opened in Canada. The other day, we were kind of like laughingly saying, we're going to have to send somebody with a bag of money to Canada to get money into this bank account. And it's like, it's 2023. This is the kind of problem you'd expect to have in 1953. So, very, very excited to be involved in such an innovative solution. Great, clear use case of crypto to solve a big mass market problem.
But this was what allowed them to scale up. And the receiving side, they don't talk too much about in this, but we know from RippleNet documents and wallet send that Ripple's topping up the wallet of the senders to just shoot the payments out. They're going to receive it from an entity and then pay out the fiat in their corridor. And they could do this without exchanges. I've been saying that for the last 3 years. The goal of ODL and Ripple is to separate from the exchanges and being dependent on them. And their patent explicitly says that. Now, they'll harness the exchanges in certain corridors and liquidity there when needed. But the ultimate goal is to get to the primary liquidity market. Where's the primary liquidity market? That is on the XRP ledger, which is a value exchange in of itself. And with the AMMs is going to have deep pools of liquidity that everyone can contribute to and draw off. And that is XRP's value proposition. So we are close to that. By providing a single API for ODL flow, we'll be able to improve the sender experience by reducing failure rates and enabling new corridors. So that's enabling redundancy in corridors where we already have exchanges. So that's important too. And they're ramped up to 40 to 45 corridors, and we know they put billions through. This is how they did it. And they were pretty quiet about it. Nobody really said much because we got the numbers, but it just wasn't talked about. Didn't affect price, and this is why to this day we get all this speculation because nobody really understands what's going on. Well, we finally know what's going on for the most part of how this is going to affect then ultimately have an impact on XRP Ledger. But it's not the only thing. Ripple's focus is institutional DeFi. This is to build a liquidity to support that and to drive XRP's economic model and demand for it. That's what it's doing. It's also solving a problem and helping their business model too. I think the word exchange throws people off. What you see as exchanges now, those are masquerading as exchanges. A real exchange is like the New York Stock Exchange. And what they're building here is the next generation of an exchange, because then they could offer services to many enterprises and other entities who could provide what Coinbase provides, but without having to onboard just to Coinbase. And they could customize it for their customers. Then they have the custody side of things. Now you have Medico, and you have PolySign, AtomicNet, and whatever other custodial network that is part of that. Because we see they're integrated with Fireblocks, Talos, Copper, Bitstamp, BitGo. All integrated since 2021. So that is very telling. And it shows that everyone's been looking at ODL really wrong. Like, they're not going to exchanges. I mean, we have all the documented evidence. I'm going to make multiple videos over this, just over and over again, so to be repeated and redundant, but it's the only way to get through, I realized. Because making like one really good video, it just doesn't get around enough. So I'm just going to keep beating into the ground with them. I have so much information on it. Just put different information over it and talk over it. And some are just going to be voice notes. Just so people understand that supply to provide liquidity will come from the exchanges. But what else that supply does is it creates then the demand for a borrowing and lending market. That is what is needed. That's how you become a dominant asset in this new decentralized financial market infrastructure. That's what the XRP ledger and its protocol chains are going to be. And it's going to be networks of them. But we also need an ecosystem. So it's not just about Ripple. They're going to provide this organic flow. Uniswap has been massively successful, and it's just noise traders. The liquidity providers, most of them don't even make profit because of all the flaws, the front running, the high fees, the impermanent loss there. If one asset shoots up, if they're uncorrelated, the thing is that the volatility, a lot of people look at it like, well, if XRP goes from $1 to $4, now I have less XRP. And at the end, you have a little more USD, but I could have made 400%. I only made 200%. That's from your point of view. But over that whole time period, and nothing happens in a straight line, as you could see the last 4 years, and there's no switch getting flipped, it goes up, down, and the arbitragers are making all this profit because of the external price getting out of sync with the AMM. So the AMM is always selling slightly higher or slightly lower. And since the AMM is integrated with the DEX order book, it's aware of that, and it could send its own orders there. They could do some very interesting things. And the arbitragers are incentivized to instantly rebalance the pool, and they pay for that right. And that value comes back to the pool. So the more volume, the more volatility means more revenue generated, and it means less volatility. So a lot of people still might be saying, well, I don't get as much capital appreciation because half is going to be in the other asset. It's important to note you get an LP token, which is no regular asset. It's a super asset. because it's guaranteed by the ledger, and it represents two assets that are yield bearing, that are tax free, so you don't pay taxes on them until you cash out or sell the LP token. But if you use this collateral, it can be used in derivatives. So there's a multitude of ways to hedge derivatives and options that will be available, that if you want that upside volatility, then fine. But if the price drops 30%, now you have more XRP than you had to start with. So it goes both ways. And permanent loss is way overblown in our community because there's a lack of really understanding what it is, and scares people. You don't really lose value, but everyone is so afraid that the price is going to explode. Now, you don't have to do that, and it's not for everyone. It's directed at people who want to earn a steady yield and understand it, and maybe as the value goes up higher, it's just a way to steady yield. It's the economic model for XRP, especially in the fiat pools. But if you have an XRP against like a Bitcoin pool or another asset that's correlated, there's very little impermanent loss. And it's just an opportunity cost. There's divergent loss if the pool's very unbalanced, and then you go to exit. But that LP token is value, and that can be used. But what does that create now? That person, say, wants to leverage up because now they want to borrow the same two assets, say XRP USD. That is actually the least possible liquidation proven by mathematical data recently. So if you wanted to borrow against a stable coin, it's more risky. If you wanted to borrow a stable coin against crypto, more risky. But if you borrow the same two assets that are your LP token, the risk is just that they could diverge in price so much, but it's more capital efficient. You could have 110, 120%. All it has to do is be over collateralized, and it could instantly just go back into the pool and just redeposit it. So the lenders are guaranteed to always get their XRP back. So that means people could lend XRP, USD, fiat. You create a whole market because you have now the lending, the borrowing side. You need both sides to create a lending and borrowing. And that's one of the second most powerful things. After AMM indexes, that's the market. He's been saying it, David Schwartz. He goes, we're going to need lending and borrowing. And he says identity. That will allow all institutions to participate. They keep saying institutional DeFi. I have not heard an influencer or a YouTuber, maybe I missed it, but say it once. Like this big fear of DeFi and stuff in the community. You better get over it, because you need to know what you're involved into. You know, the cold wallet days, you know, you keep it there, but you have 5 different ways to use your XRP. If your asset's not earning yield, then it doesn't deserve to be in the top 10, because these assets need to be in demand. Right now, we're a pet rock. That's why the price hasn't gone anywhere. It's not manipulated. ODL's not going to drive the price. We're not there yet. We're early, but that's okay. We have an ecosystem to be built out. We're at a crucial time, and we are mission critical, as Arthur Brito has said in 2014. The community is not just there for support. We're mission critical to the success. And that's right after he says we're building a banking financial platform for banks. And they did that. And now they created Liquidity Hub, which is their lending. And we just need to keep our eyes on the facts of what's coming, not the hype, not the wild speculation, but not the FUD, but the truth. And that's what we want. We want to understand what's coming. And the most important thing that take away from this is you need to open your mind and understand that ODL and Liquidity Hub operate a little different than maybe you thought. First things first, they will not raise the price on their own. Everyone should know that. It's always been known that it's pass-through. But there's certain things I need to explain that could be perceived as negative, but if you don't understand the context of what they're doing and then the ultimate plan for natural, organic, native liquidity, that is the goal. And where is the most natural native liquidity? XRP Ledger in itself is a value exchange. It's a distributed exchange with a payment execution engine that is now getting a very advanced automated market maker integrated with those two technologies. But what everyone doesn't realize, and this is where you need to have vision, it's not just about the currency or the asset. It's about the protocol. And now I'm going to break down why it's about the protocol. It's not just the asset. It's not just because XRP is a good bridge currency. It's because of the protocol. And we're going to dive into Friedrich Hayek versus Keynes, who talked about the supernatural currency was Keynes and said we need this global currency that's superior money that would be in between all the other currencies. And Hayek believed that currency competition was best, where private currencies can compete with the sovereign currencies. And they both inherently had the same type of goals. They didn't want a monopoly supranational currency. It was just there so nobody controlled it, right? And Hayek is the one that is focused on here because everyone goes right to, oh, there's going to be another reserve currency. There's going to be no other reserve currency. It's what Hayek said and Ripple's insights from the early days, and it was wiped from online. Like I had to pull this from the Wayback Machine, and the only way I found it was through reading through the money infrastructure PDF of Ripple, which I've talked about before, in the references. That's the only way I was able to get to something like this. So this is something you just can't search on Google and find, but it's real, and it was from the early days, and they had an economist come in as an advisor and explain that really the Ripple, they call the Ripple network then, well, everything was called Ripple, but it's super relevant because Hayek envisioned or dreamed of an electronic calculator that could swap between currencies and quote prices at any given time. And in 1976, that was unheard of. There was no way that you can even think that was feasible. And he believed currency competition would be the best. Now the XRP ledger, Ripple says our distributed exchange, we think does one better. But you notice how the currency of XRP hasn't been mentioned yet? I haven't said anything about that because there's two sides. It's the underlying value exchange. Now, why is this important that this electronic calculator that could swap between all these different currencies? Because that's primary liquidity. It means XRP, the asset, has its own market for liquidity. It's not going to be dependent on secondary market liquidity, even though it will pull from there. And that ultimately is what's going to drive the price. But the goal is to create a primary market for liquidity. And Prisma is the technology that intelligently is like a liquidity aggregator. It can do everything from distribute the supply, does all the selling, it does everything. And this is why they opened the engineering hub in Toronto, so that they expanded the Iceland team, who some branched out to build other projects, which we'll talk about in this series. But this, David Schwartz then, so Dark Horse, I got to give a shout out to, because he didn't just find this, he made it a point to go on that Twitter Spaces and get his question in. It was 3 a.m. here, at least on the East Coast. I was not in the Twitter Spaces, but everyone focused on David Schwartz talking about the reserve currency, the reserve currency. We're heading into a digital world with a new asset class. And everyone gets stuck on the ticker symbol, the price, and stable this, stable that. Forget that right now. We need to look beyond that. That's important. I'm going to get to it, but it's not so simple. And it's not a chosen asset. There's the underlying ledger, and there's a lot of selective hearing. And what we're going to do is we're going to focus on things David Schwartz says in this Twitter Spaces that are key. And we're going to make a list of things that we're going to debunk that you could kind of like put on the back burner. And when you hear them, you just kind of like then look over them. And then we're going to make a list of things that he focuses on. So when you hear them, you pay a little more attention to them. And that's how you weed through the noise in this community that is ultimately about to get massively disrupted on all fronts. And we're going through that period now where people are in frustration and they just don't even know what to cover. So you regurgitate fake news, all this. But what's so great is it's actually perfect timing, because now we have this period to now bring this out. And I want to share this with everyone so that in the right way, so that it's explained right. So those who have the knowledge to grasp this can then pass it on to others. And then we level up the community as one. And by doing that, that removes that hypey, just baseless, wild speculation. And it's like, here's the facts. Like, debunking the first thing he says is we pivoted from banks. So banks using XRP, everyone says that all the time, right? But then for what? Is that going to raise the price? Like, what is that going to do? There's no context to it. No, they're not going to use XRP. And explain that and break it down with the Basel III and the prudential regulations. That's not the focus. That's off to the side. Now, are they going to play a role in all of this? Absolutely, but not that role. And they're not putting on the balance sheets. That's not the focus. It's actually, and we're going to even go back to the Arthur Brito and show how you, actually the community, and is mission critical to all of this. And how David Schwartz's vision, which I've talked about before, and I know you've heard, all of you who listen to this have heard him say, public pools of global liquidity that everyone could contribute and draw from. And that's his vision, but it's also his answer to when he's asked what will drive price. Now we have the context and the answer to prove what will drive it, and you're directly involved and directly able to participate. And they're building the top-down side of it to allow for institutions and retail to all go in the same pools, because ultimately the way to get the deepest liquidity is for everyone to participate. But they've been incentivizing and paying for liquidity for years, and they're slowly ramping it up. But the ultimate goal has always been to put it through the ledger, because that's your primary market. That's where you want it to be, not these exchanges. They're just gateways. That's really what they are. The ledger is the exchange. Now, with the AMM, you provide a supply side. So you perform this, you give it an economic model, because now you could earn yield. Everybody is able to now earn revenue. So they could pivot the incentives from market makers to other things more on ledger. And David Schwartz actually confirmed that'll be bolstered by incentive programs. And he goes as far as saying we are underway having a major effort to integrate the Prisma, the ODL Liquidity Hub into the AMM and the DEX on the XRP ledger. That right there is what we're waiting for. When that happens, we don't even need a whole DeFi ecosystem. They just need to figure out the compliance side and the identity, and its massive wall of value will pour in, because these pools can, as they ramp up the volume, that's why shooting off payments that just go to other corridors sound like, oh, whatever. Why is that going to affect price? It's not. But what does it do? It drives volume, which drives fees, which drives people into the pools, which drives deeper liquidity. And we're going to go through the liquidity flywheel, which shows how the price will be driven. XRP's utility is as liquidity, but it's because of its protocols that it's a value exchange. And David Schwartz says this multiple times. So everything I'm saying here is going to be backed up with explicit videos confirming exactly that, and with content on the screen that is going to support that. What I would like this to do is then be a foundation for us to speculate on what comes next. instead of trying to just debunk everybody else's things and catch people up to where we are, let's now speculate on what matters. Like, for example, they talk a lot about lending and borrowing, and institutional DeFi. David Schwartz goes out of his way to say again, is Ripple's focus in the Twitter spaces. He goes, it's not IBM participating in Sushi Swap. It's different. So just because it says institutional, there's a bias that I think people have in their head of how things were going to be and how they're going to ride the coattails, and Ripple is going to ramp up and they're the chosen one and all this. Throw that out. You need a clean slate. It's not that different, but it involves you more so. And I think this community is going to see that they don't even have to participate in the AMMs just to get benefits out of this. That's another important takeaway, because it's the economic model that will ultimately have to compete with the other assets. So even though there's these networks like Ethereum, Cardano, XRP Ledger, which are going to be networks of networks, and they'll benefit each other, and the assets could move across them and be issued on them and bridged. But the assets themselves, as native assets of those ledgers, will compete and have their own economic models. XRP has no economic model right now, zero. There's no fee model, it has no yield, it has no storage demand, and it doesn't even, you can't even say like it has an ecosystem where it's being used in a lot. That's coming. And also all those other things. Its economic model is the AMM as supplying liquidity. And David Schwartz confirms this. He says, I'm so excited about the AMM. Why is this guy so excited about this? Because it's what it opens up. It's not just getting deeper liquidity. It makes it competitive, but it also, what it does do is it provides an avenue for a then adjacent borrowing and lending market. So Ripple's bootstrapping it right now. So Prisma's lending XRP. And I'm going to break down the whole thing from MoneyGram to everything, how ODL really works, and also Liquidity Hub. Everyone was so concerned why Liquidity Hub didn't mention XRP. Well, that's because they start with XRP. To avoid prefunding, they start with XRP. And the ODL documents are open source with RippleNet and Liquidity Hubs. So it explains all of this. So we're going to go through the facts. Now, the only thing I will say is that the court documents are 3 years old. So you have to keep that in mind when they're talking about this. In those 3 years, they've obviously became market makers, which they talk about in this as it's an idea. And they talk about external markets being Liquidity Hub, which wasn't yet launched, but it was always part of the plan. They say, oh, well, we did that because our customers wanted us to. Yeah, okay. It was always part of the plan. But this intelligent distributed trading platform is the proprietary, missing piece. Everyone thinks, oh, RippleNet, oh, it's a messaging platform like Swift. Yeah, it's that, but it's a lot more. It's an application layer. And the ironic thing is they give two descriptions of RippleNet. And I think that's just fascinating. So this platform is foundational element of our RippleNet payment and Liquidity Hub products, enabling us to deliver optimum liquidity for every customer in the world in a cost-effective, robust, and scalable manner, both internal and external stakeholders, to ensure our platform's scalability, support all Ripple's current and future businesses. So this is with markets and trading systems. So why is Liquidity Hub important, and why starting with XRP is relevant at all? Because you're able to bootstrap. If the entity who is offering services to their customers, and you have this intelligent, basically API they just plug into, they have a pile of XRP and their customers want Bitcoin, right? It automatically will shoot the XRP out, buy Bitcoin with it. Now that goes into a Bitcoin XRP route or pool of some sort, and then brings XRP back. So you would think, oh, that's a sell or something, but it's not. It's volume. When that's on the ledger, it would run through the XRP BTC pool. And that allows them to avoid prefunding. Now, what we don't know, and I'll just say this, is in those 3 years, we can only speculate what has happened behind the scenes to match with, like, for example, like today, Crypto already put out the money service providers license Ripple's trying to get in the US and how involved they are in the markets and trading. So that's something that in the documents they weren't yet involved in. We don't know how that applies, but we could speculate that 3 years later, this thing ramped up. I mean, it plugs into exchanges and sits in between the order book of the bid and asks and sells for the receivers. So MoneyGram was a receiver. They would receive the XRP, sell it immediately, and then the fiat would get distributed out through that domestic payment system or whoever their partner, and they have a payout partner network. And that's where the banks come in. So everyone needs a bank account. The exchanges need a bank account. The receivers need a bank account. The market makers need a bank account. So right now there's two ways. And not every corridor has an exchange, but they have a market maker. And they've been incentivizing these market makers to make liquidity in these corridors that don't have liquidity. But they admit that they expected more organic liquidity in 2020 and they didn't get it. And it shows that just because they think something's going to go one way, it has to pivot and roll the other way. Just like he said, our first target was banks. We thought banks were going to be the one that was best target. And we realized that the cost of capital was better aligned with payment service providers and maybe lower tier banks, not tier 1, tier 2, or even tier 3. Even though, tier 2 and tier 3, I think they could bring on, but offering services. So banks don't need XRP at any price because banks aren't holding XRP anytime soon. With the capital requirements from the prudential regulations of the BIS at 1,250%, they're not holding anything on their balance sheets. They're going to be more on the supply side. The issuers of stablecoins we need. That's what we need. Desperately. There's not going to be stablecoin pools. Those are useless. Decentralized stablecoins, though, that's a different story. But one of the reasons why we don't have an ecosystem really much on the XRP ledger, and this is important to note, is we don't have programmability. It's built into the ledger, and that's great. And it's a secure, robust payment system. And you could trade, make payments, but we don't have a DeFi ecosystem. And this is why Hooks is so adamant about building their sidechain, which is going to have Hooks and Evernode, layer 2 powerful smart contracts, because they're necessary. If we want to attract developers, we want XRP to have a utility. Everyone's like, oh, utility. XRP doesn't have any utility right now. You're sitting in everyone's cold wallet there, hoping that the price is going to rise. Staring at the chart, alligator symbols on charts and stuff. Get out of here with that. You need to see real demand. It's a new asset class. XRP is a network. And it's going to be a network of many networks. But what is it more so than anything else? It's a protocols. The values are in the protocol. XRP is the electronic calculator that Hayek could only imagine. And they talk about Keynes and Hayek, who were the two economists. One believed that there should be a supernatural currency, and the other one said, and Hayek said that, and the other one said there should be competition amongst many currencies. We're not going to get another supernatural currency. Fiat, just because one ends, we're going to end another one. That 100-year stuff's over. We're in a digital age. We literally have a super electronic calculator, like he explained. The XRP ledger could swap between any assets. Now, it's not a fully complete system because it's missing, like, the idea of bringing over Bitcoin and other cryptos in a decentralized way, and it's also missing the OFAC compliance of regulated stablecoin, like deposit tokens. Not necessarily CBDCs, because those are 3 to 7 years out. Not the plow one, but that's the testing ground. So that then they could show, hey, banks, you want to issue stablecoins. As soon as they're a stablecoin issuer, we'll have multiple fiat. We need as much fiat on there as possible. Do you know why? Because if an institution And it's not just banks. There's 10 or 12 big banks in the world. Everyone else is looking to try to take market share from them. They want things to stay as they are. So then when we say the banks, there's only 10 or 12 banks that think like that. And that's not that relevant. They don't need those banks. Okay? There's plenty of asset managers and a whole buy side. So it's not like you have to capture the big banks and then they say it's okay. XRP is not going to be bridging every CBDC out the gate. Like, it doesn't have to. And that's might not even be the ultimate goal. It's to create a more than a currency, more than a liquidity solution. It's a protocol and a money infrastructure with its own economy that supports applications and its own financial system. It's so much more than a calculator, but it is truly a currency exchange. Like, that's important to understand for any tokenized asset. It's not a smart contract AMM. It's always going to have an advantage if done right, because the payment execution engine literally pathfinds. And that's Arthur Britto's tech from coming from the background of internet service provider. That's where it comes from. And Liquidity Hub is integrated with all these big OTC desks and everything. It's just a matter of then plugging it in to the on ledger. Now, I don't know what Ripple's plans for smart contracts on the ledger are, but I do believe that, hooks is something not developed by them, but they support it, and they use it in their CBDCs platform for probably wallets for smart accounts, because hooks gives you smart accounts basically at layer 1, and it's very powerful. It's very powerful for retail, very powerful for enterprise, but enterprise applications built outside the blockchain, how can they interact with the XRP ledger? I don't know. But that would seem the missing link. And that's where RippleNet comes in. It's the hosted application layer, as we described earlier. That's what RippleNet is. It's an application hosted in the cloud. And it also has this distributed trading platform, electronic market making services. And it's highly performant, using cutting-edge machine learning and engineered techniques. So when that ramps up, it's just volume. That's what we want. We want volume running through the pools as much as we can, and that will drive people to stake the pools, which pulls XRP off the exchanges, which drives up the price because they can earn yield. So I'm Mickey B. Fresh, and I'm out.
So I was always of the mind that this system was going to be ripe for some kind of a disruption. And when I saw DeFi, I started to see where that disruption was going to come from. And I started to understand that this is going to be where it goes. And what I've tried to tell people is what you need to understand about this new DeFi system is it will start in the third world, and it will grow from there into the second world, third world, and then it will come here and completely flatten you. United States, I don't see us in any way being the leader in this. I think we are it's going to be rammed down our throat, is what it's going to be. And it just occurred to me that this is a brand new financial system, and that this is going to replace the current CeFi financial system.